My name is David Jones, and I work for the Office of Homeland Security in Hunt County, Texas. It is a county office and not a federal office. Our functions are several. I'm trained as an arson investigator, so under the fire marshal's function, I do fire investigations. I am the bioterrorism coordinator for the county. We also have environmental enforcement function and emergency management, which is particularly apropos in the light of the fact this is in the middle of the COVID-19 pandemic. Um, and so those are kind of the overarching things. There's some other duties as assigned type of things that come on. Um, but that's me and my occupation. I found Jesus, or I say I found Jesus. I asked him to come into my life when I was 17. He found me. He knew me all along, even before there was a word on my tongue. He knew my thoughts. I, so I'll say that differently. When I finally listened to him, I was 17, and we were in a revival at Parkside Baptist Church in Denison, Texas. And Steve Maples came over and asked me if I wanted to accept Jesus, and it was, yes, I do. And Jesus entered my life, and I wish I could say that, boy, I lived for him every day ever since then. I didn't. I haven't. But he's never forgotten me. And like a father who corrects his child when he strays, I have had several corrections. And I think it was one of those things that when my mother would tell me that the School of Hard Knocks charges a high tuition for its lessons, but a fool will learn in no other, it really wasn't until a few years ago I realized that she wasn't being real kind to me in what she was saying. She was seeing some things that I wasn't seeing in myself. But she was right. I can honestly say that Jesus has never departed from me, and that I can remember as a young man, probably 18, 19, probably 2 or 3 years after my salvation, we were in a youth group, we were praying, and the prayers going around the room, and I was preparing myself for what I was going to say, and I was just, I was kind of keying on what other people were saying and other things going around, when the thought came to me, and it had to be Jesus. He just wasn't speaking out loud where everybody else could hear, but it was one of those things where he said, "Don't you think I already know what you're thinking?" And that just so shattered me. I mean, it just shocked me and shattered me. I was like, ugh. By the time my turn to pray came, all I could say was, "God, you already know my thoughts and you know my prayers." And I passed and I let it go on. Because I was preparing myself to pray a prayer before men and not before him. But when he spoke to me, and that's kind of been most of the way that he's talked to me. I've had one incident where I think he sent somebody to talk to me because in a very deep down portion of my life, and I was out all by myself at a lakeside and just really in turmoil, a stranger walked up with a dog, and he just said, "Jesus says it'll be all right." And he kept walking. And I looked away, and when I looked back, I didn't see any man, I didn't see any dog, but that's the only time I've had that experience. And while that was calming, it didn't take away all the anxiety, but things did turn out all right. As far as baptism in the Holy Spirit, there are many things that I look at it as in what's covered a lot in Corinthians, and it talks about the gifts and the manifestations and various things. I already spoke Italian, and I speak Spanish and German now, so I'm not going to claim that I speak in heavenly tongues. I do speak in some earthly tongues, but there's no doubt that as Peter saw the tongues of fire on the Gentiles in Acts, I have no doubt that the Holy Spirit has come to dwell in me. I'm not real proud of some of the places I've taken him, but he has always been faithful and always talk to me when I'm finally still enough to hear his voice. I can't say that I've had any visions and dreams. Had a few nightmares. But I can honestly say that the change in my life was such that in one incident in the summer of 1992 when I got shot, the instant I got shot in the chest, my military training had taught me to check to see if it was a sucking lung wound, see if it was going to be pink and frothy, so that I'd know to cover that up so the lung wouldn't collapse. But as soon as it happened and I was aware I'd been shot, the immediate thought came to me that, and it's just like as audible as some of the previous encounters, he said, "You're not going to go see your mother tonight." My mother had died 2 years before. So I knew from that point forward, I was going to be fine. As a matter of fact, I went to one of the officers on the scene and I said, "I need to go to the hospital." And she said, "What's wrong?" I said, "I've been shot." And I told her I wanted her to take over the scene. She was the most experienced officer we'd had. And so when another officer showed up, I asked him to take me to the hospital. He was driving so fast it scared me more than getting shot. And I told him, I said, "I'm going to make it there. Slow down. I don't want to have my blood commingled with yours." So, that I have very vivid memories of that night, but I also have very vivid memories of the recovery time and the peace that came over me. That while there was great turmoil in the community over the incident, I was at peace, and my blood pressure was as low as a newborn babe. It was just great. And coming back to work was a good experience. I can say that the city supported me excellent in tremendous ways. I guess I have to tell one little story that comes to mind just because I'm impressed to tell it. I remember when I was working for a particular city, and there was some controversy that came up that I was right in the middle of, and as a sergeant supervisor, it was really dicey, and there was a lot of political implications with it. So I drove to a neighboring city, and I went to the first church. There's a First Baptist church in town, and I went in and I asked the secretary, I said, "I need to speak with somebody who's a mighty prayer warrior, who is mighty in spirit, and somebody that just really knows God on a first name basis and doesn't have to be reintroduced." And she said, "I'm sorry, we don't have anybody here like that. Would you like to talk to the pastor?" I said, "No, thank you, I'll pass." So I went to another church down the road, and when I asked that question, the lady said, "Oh, we've got this wonderful lady. She's a nurse at the hospital. She heads up our prayer group. She does all the scheduling, and she makes sure all that." And she let me talk to her. I shared the concerns. We had a prayer. And this resolution to that political incident was something I never would have envisioned. But that's the way God works. We can't see the way He's going to do it. When we read in our Bibles how God solves the problems for the Israelites when they're in the wilderness, He never solved their same problem of their sin the same way twice. Whenever they were wandered from Him, whenever they were apostate, whenever they quit believing Him, when they worshiped idols, they did that multiple times. He still brought them back, or He delivered them from their enemies. The same enemies, He delivered them differently each time. We have to be careful that we don't try to replicate what's already been done. Seek Him and let Him show us how He's going to solve it this way and uniquely. If I've learned one thing in life, He will not solve it the way I tell Him to, and He won't solve it the way I expect Him to, and He won't solve it the way He's done it before. But that's kind of the fun when you learn to look at the fun of it. So that's been my life.